we can chip away at it.
Now, you had also taken some time off of work, right, during your recovery. What was that like?
I was really grateful that work was able to be so supportive of my recovery. So I didn't go back on that Monday after my Wednesday accident, and it wasn't until August, so almost a full year later, that I actually went back with a plan. So part of what I had to figure out was just the safety nets that were in place, so disability and insurance and that kind of stuff. I didn't even know my work had a specific dedicated HR person who deals with these things. But when I did find out about it, I was really grateful that Rachel was able to help me navigate those systems because, again, still recovering from brain injury. And so getting all that paperwork about what I needed to do and what forms I needed to fill out and what I had to submit was just, again, a lot of spoons that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And with the tasks at work, like I have to take all of these breaks, which is really difficult because, when you get into the groove of doing something, you want to just keep pushing and it's hard to stop. So I literally have to put a timer on to say, okay, it's been 15 minutes. I need to lie down or close my eyes or whatever it is, meditate for 5 minutes. And the tasks that I have at work are they're either computer intensive, like all of our files are on the computer and I'm staring at a screen or having to stare at a screen, or I have to be in court, which the fluorescents in there are terrible. And the sound and just like paying attention and tracking everything was really, really challenging. At first, like I found being in a room full of people, because your attention is divided a bunch of ways, it was much easier earlier on in my recovery, even kind of last summer, to have a one-on-one conversation versus sitting there in court and like having to pay attention to what everyone says. Even when it's not my matter that's being addressed in court, I still have to kind of keep my ears open, right, as to what's going on. So that's a lot of filtering for your brain. And my brain became this litmus test again. It would just feel tired and pressury when it was being overworked.
Mm-hmm. And so now it's been a year and a half. Do you feel like you've made a full recovery?
No, I unfortunately don't feel like I've made a full recovery. I mean, I feel like I'm much closer to a recovery, but it's still a gradual process. As I work more hours, I'm not quite full-time yet. I'm about 4 days right now and upping those hours. I don't have spoons to do the things that I want to do. Like I haven't been to the pottery studio in a couple of months. And I limit my social activities really to kind of once a week after work, if I have anything planned. And before I was very, very on the go, and maybe a little bit too much so. So I'm happy to scale back a little bit on all of the things and curb my FOMO, which is something I've worked on for the last little while as well, and turn it into the joy of missing out instead. But I am having like the bad days, quote unquote bad days that I have now, they're definitely much less symptomatic than the bad days I had, say, 3 months ago or 6 months ago. Yeah, so I don't know how much longer it's going to take, to be honest. And learning patience has also been part of this process for me.
What it sounds like is you are taking things a lot more slowly than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing the value of simply being in the moment and allowing things to unfold as they need to, and not putting yourself or this process of life under a deadline.
Absolutely. And I mean, part of this process is just enjoying it too, right? It's rediscovering things. Like, oh, the joy of rediscovering books was amazing. And the first time I was in court and ran a contested matter, like it felt good. I was really, really tired. But, there's this time when you worry you're not going to get back to what you were before. Mm-hmm. And now I'm starting to see glimpses of it. So that's really nice as well. I remember driving for the first time. That was so exhausting. And then
Mm-hmm.
driving in bad weather was exhausting. And now it's not really a problem, right? So
what have you learned about humility and being okay with your own limits in the face of things like returning to work?
That's a great question. It has been a really humbling experience. Like I was saying earlier, in terms of leaning on my community and my partner, etc., for caretaking of me through my recovery, it's also learning to lean on my colleagues, at work and say, hey, like I can't do this. I need to tap out. Professionally, it's hard, right? Like I want to know that I can do everything myself, and I have this expectation of what kind of lawyer I should be and all of the skills that I should have and what would make me a good, litigator. But I remember earlier on, I think it was probably in the fall sometime, and I said I would take on writing this written submission for court. And I realized like halfway through, I was like, I can't. Like I'm really, and I feel bad that I said yes to it because I felt like I was disappointing everyone around me, and I wish I had recognized earlier that I couldn't do it. You know, it takes overcoming my fear to go to the lawyer who asked me to do it and say, look, I'm really sorry. Like I thought I could, I can't. But I got over it and I said it and we made it happen and we made it work and it was fine, right? Like things get done. We're all very supportive. But I have to get over my own hang-ups of asking for help.
And to me, it sounds also like you're forced to become more communicative through the little moments over the day. Because I think about my natural reaction to taking on something and then realizing that I maybe can't do it is to simply buckle down and tell myself, okay, you're not going to sleep very much in this next little while, but you're going to push through and you're not even going to tell anybody how hard it is. You're just going to do it.
Yep.
And it sounds like through this process of recovery, you learned that you just cannot do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think work ethic's really important to me, right? And I pride myself on being able to meet deadlines and get things done. But I've always been able to before, but now what's forcing me is really my body, right? So it's I have to listen to my body saying, hey, whoa, stop. Like you can't do this. Your brain's on fire. And then translating that to the outside support world, right, of my colleagues and saying, hey, I need help. I need help. I can't do this.
Is there something that you think most people get wrong about concussion?
I think, well, it is an invisible matter. So like all other invisible hindrances, there's a misconception that it's not as debilitating as it actually is, I think. I mean, it depends on where you are during the recovery process. Certainly, I still catch myself feeling a bit silly when people ask me how I'm doing, and I honestly tell them, hey, I'm having a really shitty day. Like, I'm just really, really tired. Because I'm cogent, I can talk to you, I can, it looks like I can get my work done, it looks like I'm getting through the day, I'm obviously able to walk, here and there, it's not physical, I don't have a cast on my head or anything. And so conveying that to people is more of a conversation than you can have, right? You're not really wearing a big sign that says, hey, I have a concussion, when you're on the transit or wherever or dealing with the cashier. So that it can be such a variable recovery that is invisible is something that, you might know, but not know on a gut level. And I'm grateful that there's more awareness about concussion now and concussion recovery. And like you said, the length of recovery can be so long and variable. People are starting to know about it, but I had shared my story with some folks and just what it feels like in terms of the actual symptoms and my day-to-day, and they were surprised to hear about that.
And on the topic of these things that are invisible, it also includes any kind of like chronic fatigue or autoimmune disease, or of course the whole host of mental health issues. These are things that you cannot tell just by looking at somebody, even if they seem perfectly functional to you on the outside.
Absolutely. And I mean, how do you go on a bus when you're like exhausted and you're super tired and you really want to sit down, but you're like a healthy looking 30-something-year-old, right? Like, do you go and ask the little old lady who's sitting there, please, ma'am, can I have a seat?
Right.
Well, no, like you suck it up.
Yeah,
or,
right.
But I think just if we're all a little more compassionate and give people the benefit of the doubt, then like it doesn't matter if you have a concussion or not. Like you can just, even if someone's having an off day, right? If you're able to treat them and say, hey, like we're all part of this together, we're all part of this big circle that's humanity, then we can all do a little bit better. So yeah, like I definitely don't think it's concussion specific.
Well, what I have learned from you is that there's been so many opportunities for learning and self-development that you've actually, you had no choice but to learn those things. And there's a lot of people who go through their lives without learning those things, or they learn them at a much later point in their lives. And you're getting all of this wisdom, all of this experience now. And I'm wondering how it's changing the way that you see your life and changing the way that, you interact with people in the world.
It has definitely made me more mindful of what's important to me, and kind of do that deep dive into what it is. What is it? What does it mean to live a good life? And what do I want out of life, right? And I know I'm very driven by my relationships with my community, and there's certain relationships I want to work on and redevelop or develop anew. I had alluded to some of the challenges that I've had with my family, with my mom, redeveloping that relationship in a healthy way, also rebuilding something with Jeff. And so just learning to be a little kinder and a little more compassionate with those around me, but also with myself, because if I'm not compassionate with myself, and I hold myself to these ridiculous standards, well, then that frustration's not going to help in terms of my interactions with the world. So yeah, I just want to go through the world and hopefully share this wisdom with people so that they don't have to go through anything firsthand as traumatic as a brain injury to learn some of this, but to be kind to others and to get out and play, be in nature. Do those things that make you feel alive, because work can be fun. Like there are certain highs that I get when we've been in a hearing for multiple days and you're working really hard, especially if you're, working with a colleague who you really like working with. But that's not what defines me, right? It's like I'm grateful to have a job that lets me pay my bills and live a life that lets me go and spend time at the pottery studio and spend time learning new skills and pay for these experiences and whatnot. But yeah, it's experiences that I'm really enjoying. I don't really care about stuff so much. I mean, that's been what I've been working on for the last little while anyway, with my relationship to things and to people and prioritizing what's important. And the concussion recovery has definitely highlighted the importance of all of this, and that it's never too late, right? It doesn't matter if you're 50 or 60 and coming to these realizations, or if I'm only coming to these now. You hear of people who go through these massive growth experiences. They've traveled all over the world in their 20s, and they've come to these insights, or they've been meditating since they're 16, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I'm just grateful I'm, coming to these lessons now as opposed to another 30 years from now.
Beautiful. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and for sharing your life experience of this traumatic brain injury, which turned into, I guess, a blessing, if we can say that.
Absolutely. I would call it a blessing. Definitely an opportunity. It was an opportunity.
And I hope that you keep on wearing your helmet.
Yes, I hope everyone keeps on wearing their helmet.
Yeah, wear your helmet, people. This is like the moral of the story.
PSA, number
exactly.
632.
Exactly. If you get anything out of this, make sure that you wear your helmet and be kind to yourself.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Asian Stories of the Third Culture. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We have a preview of our next episode coming up for you. Before we roll it, you can find any resources referenced today in the show notes. If you resonated with what you heard on the show today, follow our Facebook page to get updates on what we're working on, and our Facebook group to add your voice to the conversation. Got the perfect third culture Asian guest for us? Get in touch on our website, beyondasian.com, or simply email us at beyondasianpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be back with another story soon. In the meantime, you can subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and nearly all your regular podcast watering holes. We are a growing podcast and therefore need your support and reviews to keep bringing you more stories like this. I'd like to thank Miholin Soon, our creative strategist and lead designer, Chicho Coppola, our 3D designer, Rami Farajpur, our developer, and Alexandra Heller, our director of marketing, for helping to bring this podcast to life. Most importantly, I'd like to thank our growing community of courageous guests who have generously shared their stories with us. Beyond Asian Stories of the Third Culture is hosted and produced by me, your Chinese-Canadian third culture kid in Berlin, Sen Jan. Here's what we've got in store for you next time.
For example, I still have a little bit of panic anytime I encounter a group of Korean people, because I know that they will know that I'm not Korean. I kind of feel like an imposter, because German people tell me I'm Korean, but Korean people know. They know I'm not Korean.
How has a Korean-German woman in Berlin dealt with cultural imposter syndrome? And how did this lead her from working in the video game industry to becoming a young adult novelist? In episode 4, I'm speaking with Sarah, whose experiences growing up in small-town Germany led to her seeking the identity she always thought she wanted in Korea.
If you look at children literature from the 90s, most of the paintings are about